before, but uh, recording is in progress. Um, I'm JR Blair, and I've been a longtime member of the Mycological Society since 1984. And I was president a couple of times. I was the Fungus Fair chair 5 times. And So I've been around the block a little bit. Uh, I initially got my credentials, if you will, of um, learning um, learning mushrooms at the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington. And If you know anything about Evergreen, it's a very alternative school. There are no grades, no degree requirements. Um, Lots of opportunity for independent study, and they have these immersion courses. In the spring of 1982, when I was there getting my undergrad, I took a 16 unit course in um, ornithology. So that's it, and it's a quarter system there. So there's one full quarter. That's all 20 of us studied was ornithology, and we were able to get through a textbook in about 5 weeks, and then we spent a great deal of time in uh, in Southeast Oregon, where I learned all about birds during that time. And then jump ahead to the fall of 1982, and I took another 16 unit course in mushrooms of the Pacific Northwest with Dr. Dr. Mike Bugh, uh, who some of you may be familiar with. He was one of the main photographers of the Audubon Guide to Mushrooms, and he more recently published a book on the mushrooms of the Pacific Northwest. It's called, ironically, also called Mushrooms of Cascadia, which is the same name as a book by Noah and Noah Siegel and Chris Schwartz. Um, so that's how I learned my mushrooms. I went on to do independent study with both of those topics, and then jump ahead to the early 1990s, and I decided to go back to school, and I ended up working with Dr. Desjardins, who's one of the authors of California Mushrooms, and I did a master's degree with him. And my thesis was fungi associated with the genus Arctostaphylos. And for those of you are not familiar with your botanical names, that is manzanita. So I crawl around on my hands and knees under manzanita bushes for a couple of winters in the mid 90s, and made about 400 collections of 135 different species, and um, and got my master's degree in 1999 at San Francisco State. I immediately started working as a lecturer at San Francisco State, adjunct faculty. And I did that until the end of 2020. So about 20 and a half years. By the way, it was a very good year to retire, if you think about it. I did about a semester and a half of remote learning, and that was about all I could deal with at the time. Um, I am um, in charge of the identification process at the Fungus Fair, Mycological Society of San Francisco Fungus Fair. And One of the first things I'm going to do is to go through that process with you, and just so you have a general idea. Um, And then we're going to go into the three main characteristics that you look for with mushrooms for mushroom identification. And I'll go into that in pretty significant detail, which may be more than you need. And so I want to just let you know that it's okay if you sort of uh, tune out at some point. Um, but try to absorb as much as you can. And and if you learn even just a fraction of what I go over, it will be very helpful for you with the endeavor that's coming up. And also, those of you who have seen the recording of last year's or attended last year's, it's very much the same. Um, I'd encourage you to stick around at least for a little bit, even if you did see it already or were there, just because the repetition's a good thing, right? Especially with learning something as complex as mushroom taxonomy. But keep in mind that there is a team of experts that are going to be putting the names on the mushrooms, a group of about 6 or 8 people who are more knowledgeable than myself, who will be doing that part of it. So, all right, well, let me jump right into the first slide here. So this is basically how it's going to work at the Fungus Fair. So for those of you who helped out last year, we are unable to get the cafeteria due to some work that's being done there. So the main part of the Fungus Fair is going to be in what's called the Little Gym. And you should get some directions from the volunteer coordinator, Elizabeth, on how to get there. But it's still at the same high school, just in a different venue. So the first thing that's happening on Saturday um, is that the 4A leaders will come to the high school. They're going to drop off their mushrooms, and each collection that they made will be put on these little styrofoam trays that we've had for 100 years, well, 50 years, and by species. And then they're going to put a paper tag on that same tray with the collection that will basically indicate their foray. So, for example, there will be mushrooms coming from San Pedro Valley County Park in Pacifica. And Miko, who is the leader of that group, that foray, will arrive. Say, I think they're going till 1 o'clock or something. So he'll arrive around 2 o'clock or so, and we'll start to unload his collections, and then we'll throw those paper tags on each of those collections. Now, some of you will be helping with that part of it. So if you're there early enough and you otherwise aren't engaged with some other aspect of this process, you can jump in, help the 4A leaders to unload their collections onto these trays, make sure that the tag has the correct 4A designation on it. So, for example, San Pedro Valley County Park will go on that, um, and then um, and then those trays with the collections on them will go onto some pre-sort tables, some categorized tables. And I think many of you have signed up for um, this little tutorial because you have signed up to be a pre-sort volunteer. Um, and that's where you will be uh, arranging them by their characteristics. So, for example, there will be a table that is for white spored gilled mushrooms, for example. And so you're going to put the collections from the tables where the collections have been unloaded by the 4A leaders, and then you're going to put them on these uh, categorize tables by characteristics. Now, this is important. If you see that there are a couple of trays that are the same species, go ahead and consolidate them. That's fine. Just make sure that the paper tags go along with the collection. So you might have, for example, a collection of um, Pseudohydnum gelatinosum. That's the cat's tongue jelly fungus. And you see that there's another tray that has that same species there. It's pretty unmistakable. Pretty, even if you don't know what it is, you look at that and you look at another tray and you see that they're the same thing. You can put those on the same tray. But again, we want to make sure that collection, that tray has both of the paper tags from from or all of the paper tags that come from other collections. It is possible, by the way, that especially with some of the bigger collections, we have forays that are at Point Reyes and up in Mendocino County. And there's going to be a lot of mushrooms coming from there. So there might be, for example, using the same species, there might be several um, bags that have the cat's tongue in them that have been put on different trays, even though they're from the same foray. So we only really need one tag per species for each foray. But that's really important that we keep track of where these different species come from. And that's why we use the paper tags. All right, so then the ID team, that's the group of experts, will then go basically walk over to the table. Let's say that they're interested in the genus Cortinarius. So they'll walk over to the brown spore guild mushroom table. They'll pull off the those um, uh, Cortinarius species. They'll put names on them on the tags. Those will then go to, oh, I forgot to put this in here. Well, I did actually. Those will be recorded. So there's a three or four people who will be typing in basically where the collections come from. So, for example, you might have Pseudohydnum gelatinosum, which again, that's the cat's tongue jelly fungus. From you might have a collection from San Pedro Valley County Park. You might have a collection from Point Reyes. You might have a collection from the East Bay somewhere. Some people might have brought some stuff in from there, and all of those need to go onto a database that we're keeping track of what mushrooms we find, what species we are finding, and where they're found. This is also important because some of the places that we collect require us to give them a list. So all of the San Mateo County Park uh, locations want us to send them a list of what we're finding where. So again, I would just want to really emphasize that those paper tags with the collection locations need to go along with them up to the recording part. Once they're recorded, it doesn't really matter. Although the paper tags are going to have the name of the species on it. So that's where hopefully some of you are here because you're a setup volunteer. So this is, I think it was labeled mushroom display tables or something like that. And here's where the folks will be setting these up in an aesthetic way. It'll kind of look like with the utilization of high technology, including toothpicks and skewers, will look like the mushrooms will be growing up out of some oak leaf duff. And we have special way to do that. So we'll have and on Saturday night for those people who are doing that, I'll give special instructions about that. Um, and then for each of those collections, for each species, there will be a laminated uh, 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 display similar to this. So it'll have the name of the mushroom. It might have a common name or a secondary name on it, and the family. Some of them even have additional information, but um, that was a little bit too much to take on this year. Maybe next year we'll do that. Um, so so anyway, and that's it. That's the whole process. All right. Are there any questions so far? You can use the chat if you have any questions as we go along. All right. So here are the categories of fruiting bodies, and um, I'm going to kind of play it by ear and see what how things are going. We have about 6 tables that we can use for the pre-sort categories, and you can see there's a lot more than 6 different categories here. So, for example, we might put all of the white spored gilled mushrooms together. We might put all of the brown spored or pigmented gills all together. Pigmented spore gilled, sorry, pigmented spored gilled mushrooms all together, and so on. So we'll see how it goes based on our space availability. All right, so I'm going to go through each of these categories um, at in a little bit. But before I do that, I want to talk about the, oh, if I can get it, there we go. The 3 main characteristics that we use for identification. That's spore color, as you may have guessed already. Um, Gill attachment, if they have gills, and stature, if it's a mushroom. So these are the 3 main things I want to talk about. Now, there's other categories, and I'll talk about those as well. So, for example, jelly fungus doesn't have gills, doesn't really have much in the way of stature. It's just a big old blob of material of tissue. Um, but this will get us started. This, by the way, is a photograph from Mendo. Some of you have been to the Mendocino Woodlands foray in November. Um, and this was not this year, but it was one year where we had tons and tons of mushrooms that we were looking at. These are the uncategorized ones, the ones that were sort of left over. Anyway, okay. Oop. All right, so let's talk about spore color. So spores can be white, brown, black, pink, or orange in color. And there are even a few other oddballs. There's one mushroom, for example, one species that's green. Um, but those are the ones. And now, if you were doing, say, a research study, and you really needed to know what color the spores are for particular mushrooms, so you couldn't do without it. The thing to do is to make a spore print. Uh, and this always goes on white paper because if you use different color paper, uh, it can actually change the your perception of color. Um, but so it's always supposed to be on white paper, and you cut the stem off of the mushroom, and then you lay the cap with the gills facing downward on a piece of white paper. Now, sometimes you get a spore print within an hour, but that's pretty rare. Sometimes you don't get anything at all, but most of the time it's sort of in between. The typical rule of thumb is you let it sit overnight. And it's a good idea to put a glass bowl or a ceramic bowl or something like that over it to kind of keep the moisture level fairly high in there. When mushrooms dry out, they're less likely to drop their spores. And so you can see most of these spore prints here. have, for example, like a clear circle in the middle there, and then this particular one is a tubed mushroom, like a bolete or something like that. Um, and then you can see some sort of cream colored ones here where the gills are like spokes of a wheel. Same thing with these here. These right here, this is where the stem was off to the side, but you can still see where the gills were. And and the spores basically fall down in between the gills, and they leave little piles. You can kind of think of them as a line of spores that are a little pile of literally thousands of spores. Um, and so that's how you should do it. Now, that would be great if we had all that much time for to set up our fungus fair so you could take spore prints and check them out and come back later. So we don't really have that option. So you're going to have to, in some cases, just guess. Or in other cases, if I'm around, you can ask me or one of the other uh, ID team members what color the spores are. Um, so for the most part, you're going to have to just kind of um, see if you can figure out what it is on your own. Now, with a lot of mushrooms, the spores color the gills. So, for example, the gills might be a pale color to begin with, like an off-white or pale gray or a pink color. And then the spores, if they're pigmented especially, can turn those gills the color of the spores. The best example of that is your basic store-bought white button mushroom slash portobello. By the way, white button mushrooms and portobellos and creminis, those are all the same species. They've just been selectively bred to be big, white or brown, and so on. But anyway, portobello, that color, the gills, is not the original color. It's that color, that chocolate brown color is because of the spores. Doesn't always work. All right, I'm going to show you why. All right, we have five mushroom species here. So I'm going to point to one at a time, and I want you to just think in your head, kind of keep track of what color you think the spores are in that mushroom. All right. So we'll start with this one right here, upper left. What color do you think those spores will be? And just kind of keep it to yourself. Think about what you think in your mind. So that's one. Here's number two in the middle. What color do you think this might be? Number three, upper right. Number four, lower right. And number five, lower left. All right. Okay, my guess is that most of you, we'll start with number one. My guess is that most of you thought this would be orange. Turns out it's a white spored mushroom. Number two, white spores, right? Oh, they're black, believe it or not. Number three, look yellow, right? White. Number four, right here, look like there might be orange or pinkish. Turns out they are pink, but it's sort of a brownish pink. And number five over here sort of looks pale, maybe a pinkish color, maybe even the brownish pink. Turns out they're chocolate brown. This is an agaricus, like a portobello or a button mushroom. So the point is that it can be a little tricky, but you can also find that some mushrooms will give you a hint of some sort. So, for example, this is a Cortinarius, and Cortinarius is so named because it has a cobwebby cortina, they call it, like which is curtain in Latin, and it's a cobwebby veil, partial veil, that leaves remnants on the stipe, and the spores fall from the gills onto those remnants and leave this beautiful rusty brown color on the those that ring that's around the stem. Similar thing going on here. This is a black spored mushroom. And again, you can see that the gills have dropped the spores on the ring that's left from the partial veil as it opens up. And if the mushroom is found in clusters, a lot of times you can see that the color of the spores, the spores are dropped on the lower layers of these clustered mushrooms. If you just looked at this mushroom, you might think it has sort of an orangey spore color. It turns out they're white, and you can see that very clearly on these underlying mushrooms that had their spores from the overlying fruiting bodies have fallen on that fruiting body. This, by the way, is a uh, honey mushroom, Armillaria, genus Armillaria. Oop, sorry. Okay, now let's talk about gill attachment. And so this characteristic really only applies to gills. And this illustration is from a glossary that is sadly out of print that was put together by Elsa Fellingha. Elsa is one of the experts who's going to be there on Saturday. And if you want to meet a real star in the mushroom identification world, you should talk to Elsa. But anyway, you can see that there are different ways that the gills of the mushroom are relative to the stem. And I just want to point out a few, uh, and I actually have them listed down here by number. So the first one here, number 18, that's what we call free gill. So this is where the gills are not attached to the stipe at all. And the I hate to keep going back to the your white button mushroom and your portobello, but those are free gills. So the genus Agaricus, which includes those, have gills that are not attached. And one way you can tell this, but I have to tell you to try to maintain constraint during the fungus fair. But if you're out in the woods and you're not sure if you bring some mushrooms back to your house, if it breaks off like a ball and socket and there's no gill remnants at the top of the stipe, that's a free gill. And so a number of groups have these free gills. And I'll show you some examples of these. Adnext basically means it goes straight across. So 19, sorry, it doesn't go straight across, it goes up, but attaches at the to the stipe. So 19 is a sort of extreme, but we do see them that way. So it's barely attached to the stipe all the way to uh, uh, 20 and 22, where the gill goes up and attaches to the stipe. 21 and 24 over here are adnate. So that basically means they go straight across. By the way, you don't need to memorize these names. Just if you happen to see um, a mushroom and it has a free attachment, that's critical. If it's not free and it's either adnext or adnate or even notched, like we see in number 23 over here, um, that don't worry too much about that. Um, Decurrent can be important. So decurrent basically means they run down the stipe like this. So my suggestion is that you be able to recognize when it's free, be able to recognize when it's decurrent, again, like 27, 28, and 29 here. And everything else is one of these three categories. Later on, when you get to the level where you're going to be one of those experts in the doing the identification, then you should know the difference between these three things. But for this uh, fungus fair and for what I need you for, free, decurrent, or other. So here's some examples. So here is a mushroom that has free gills. There's usually you can see some of the cap between the gills and the stipe. Sometimes, like with this is a bluet here. Sometimes what you see is that they are, go back here, they're like number 19, where the gills go up so tightly that it looks like they probably are free. But if you were to try to take the stipe off of a bluet, it would tear some of the gills with it, and you would see remnants of the gills on there. Yeah. Here's adnate, that's straight across, and then here's decurrent. So those are some examples of gill attachment. All right, then the third category, third thing I mentioned was stature. And so stature has to do with uh, what's it like? Is it sort of like these three right here, where you've got, or actually, yeah, these three right here pretty much all look the same, except for this one has free gills. These don't have free gills. So this is pluteoid. These are called colibioid, all the way to six. Um, or versus very thin stipe, sort of fragile looking, maybe bell-shaped or a parabolic cap, that kind of thing, versus hefty, sort of short and squat with a pretty substantial stipe, like these three, 9, 10, and 11. Um, Versus off to the side, like 12 and 13. These, by the way, these stature types are um, named after uh, genera of fungi. So pluteoid, that's the free gilled but sort of normal looking average shape, size and shape. Um, Pluteoid means that it's like the genus Pluteus. The genus Pluteus is like that, but it has free. Is like 2 and 3, but it has free gills. 2 and 3 are colibioid, like the genus Colibia. And then if they have decurrent gills, like uh, these three, 4 through 6, that's referred to as omphalloid. So having decurrent gills, but basically having an average stature. It's a lot of jargon. These are mycinoid, and these three are tricholomatoid, and then we have pleuritoid. Some of you know pleurotus, the oyster mushrooms, right? So they kind of grow off like shelves. So this is what it looks like as a cross section. Right. All right. So let's go through these groups one at a time. This is also a photograph from Mendocino. Um, some of you may know Kat back there. That she's doing a little interpretation for people. These are paper plates, and we actually write the names right on the paper plates. This is not exactly what the fungus fair pre-sort's going to look like. Maybe next year when I do this, I'll have a photograph of the actual fungus fair pre-sort setup, but I don't have one right now. All right. Once again, I want to remind you that if this is frying your brain, and I see you blink out, that's okay. But I try to encourage you to stick around and just absorb what you can and don't get overstressed about this whole thing. All right. All right. Well, let's start off looking at some examples of gilled mushrooms that have rusty uh, brown or orange spores. Okay. So these are the rusty orange spored species. This right here is a Cortinaria. So you remember I talked about them having the cobwebby veil, veil meaning the tissue that covers up the spores before they're mature. Not all mushrooms have these partial, it's called a partial veil. Not all mushrooms have a partial veil, but a lot of them do. Um, this one over here on the right side is called a phaeocolybia. It also has rusty brown spores, even though you might not be able to tell that by just looking at a young specimen like this. But they have a very deep um, stipe that goes down into the soil. If you look at these two specimens here, the white part was above the soil. The red and the dirty part were below the soil. And they actually went even a little deeper than this. And then this one over here is actually, we're going to probably see a lot of these at the Fungus Fair. This is the Gymnopolis junoneus, big Jim, they call it. And it's very, very common. It grows in these big clusters of orange fruiting bodies and orange spores, which you can tell since remember I talked about if they're layered, you can tell what color the spores are by what the upper fruiting bodies drop on the lower fruiting bodies. And that's Annie, my wife, right there too. Uh, okay, let's look at brown sport. And in brown sport, there are two categories: agaricus, which are um, it includes the white button mushroom and the portobello and so on. And these have chocolate brown, the dark chocolate brown spores, and they might start off as a pink or an off-white color. These are both pink, but remember they're going to have the free gills. So you'll be able to look in here and actually see that the gills are not attached to the stipe. They also mostly have a partial veil that leaves a ring, like here, and oftentimes leaves tissue along the edge of the cap as well. Here you can see that partial veil is just breaking open on this agaricus here. All right, and then there's a bunch of other brown spored ones that have attached gills. So these, even though they may look like they're free, like this one that looks like it's free, turns out it's actually adnexed. So the gills are going up like this, and they're attached to the stem at the top. A lot of our grassland uh, mushrooms, like this little conocobe here, have brown spores. This is a hebeloma here that has brown spores. I'm sorry, it's an inocobe. This over here is a hebeloma. So these are again some um, mushrooms that have brown spores. All right, black spored species. All right, so there's quite a few that have black spores. Here's a litter a mulch lover, grows in wood chips, has black spores, and you can tell if there's a cluster like this. A lot of times the foray will collect a bunch of them, and you might be able to see that some of the older ones that they've turned black. This one you may know too. This is a very common um, wood chip lover that we have around the Bay Area called chip cherry. Love that name. I don't love English names very much, but that one is kind of fun. Chip cherry. But again, black spores, and you can see that usually on the stipe when you turn it over. This is a Stropharia, and this is a Coprinus. This is in the group of inky caps, and they literally the gills uh, basically rot. We use the fancy term deliquesce, which means they basically turn to liquid and they're black in nature. All right, moving ahead. Pink sport. Now, this is mycological pink. I want to go back here to the agaricus right there. See that pink? This is not the pink of spores. The pink of spores is more like a sort of a brownish pink. You can kind of see it a little bit here in this. These are pluteus. Um, it's more has a brownish tone to it rather than sort of a rosy tone to it. Um, this, by the way, just to remind you, is the pluteus that for which the pluteoid stature is named after. So they're sort of an average looking mushroom, but they have free gills. And these always grow on wood. Here's another one. You can kind of see that sort of that pinkish color, but it's sort of a browny, brown tone to the coloration. Isn't that beautiful? That's it used to be called a leptonia, but now it's entoloma. And then here's another entoloma. Both of these have attached gills. Whoops, sorry. All right, and then the white spored ones. So again, I might have a pigmented spore table and a white spore table. So the first group I want to talk about are the Amanitas. Amanitas, this is a really a good place to start. So if this is really the only group that you can for sure with confidence identify at the end of Saturday night, good for you. I would say that's a good goal to achieve. Uh, Amanita has free gills, so it's hard to tell with these photographs. But right here, where the gill is attached at the top, there, and right in here, the stipe and the gills are not attached to each other. Um, they often have a partial veil, so you can see it here. Sometimes that partial veil, once it's opened up, is sort of gone. It doesn't stick around. Sometimes it leaves a ring, and a lot of times it'll leave a little tissue on the edge of the cap. But the cool thing about Amanita, really distinctive, is that they have what's called a universal veil in addition to the partial veil. So the partial veil covers the gills. A universal veil goes around the whole thing. And you can see that with this is a cocora. It's actually an edible species. And you can see that layer of tissue that wraps all the way around the whole thing. This is a grisette, and you can see that the cap is broken through that universal veil and leaves a cup at the base, very similar to what we see here. And then over here, you can see that cup as well. And then on the Amanita muscaria, arguably the most photographed mushroom in the world. This is found throughout the Northern Hemisphere, including Europe and Asia. Anyway, all those little white spots that you can see, thank you, Mario Brothers, those are little pieces of universal veil tissue that have been left there. Now, so sometimes the universal veil tissue leaves little spots like that. Sometimes it leaves a big patch, like with Cocora, if you're familiar with that. There's a big felty patch that's left in the middle. And with some species, like the death cap, the most deadly mushroom in the world, um, the universal veil is often gone on the top of the mushroom. So a lot of times people don't realize that it's actually a death cap. All right, Lepiotaceae. So this is, I put this in quotes because this family basically no longer exists. It's been broken up into groups. So so these are all in that group, that category in general. It's characterized by having white spores and free gills, and oftentimes a partial veil. So you can see that ring right there, and you can see the ring on this one over here, but no universal veil. So there's no cup at the base, and there's no tissue on the surface of the on the top. Sometimes it looks like it does. See this scaliness. This is an East Coast species called shaggy parasol, and it's known to be an edible species. These scales that are found on the top are literally part of the cap, not additional tissue like we would see in the case of a universal veil. All right, Russula and Lactarius. These are in one family, Russulaceae. The difference being that Lactarius, as you can see on this one over here, has a milky juice in the tissues. And there are not very many. There's a few others that have milky juice in the tissues, but it's pretty fail-safe characteristic with that genus, Lactarius. Russulas, which can come in many colors. This was a bunch of russulas that I collected in when I was doing some work in Yellowstone National Park, and you can see the wide variety. There may be some overlap, so that one and this one are probably the same species. This one and that one may be the same species, but there's a lot of variety in the in that genus Russula. Um, but both the Russula and Lactarius, unlike other fungi, have spherical cells. Most fungi have fibrous cells. So they run sort of the length of the stipe, or they make fibrils, or in the case of this one here, scales that that are radial in nature. And so that's because they have fibrous cells. If you were to take one of these russulas on this photograph here and snap the stipe, it'd break like chalk. And that's because it has those spherical cells. With a little bit of experience, you can tell Russula just by sort of handling it and getting a feel for it. So that's another, next to Amanita, I would say that's your second choice for learning a family at the Fungus Fair. Okay, Tricholomatoid. This is a group that has been broken up into many different families actually now. It used to be one family, Tricholomataceae, but now it's many families. They're all white spored. They all have attached gills, and they all tend to be fairly robust. So I talked about bluets before. Here's a bluet. This is the honey mushroom um, that grows in these big clusters, and I showed you how you can see the spore print on the mushrooms below because they always grow in these big clusters. Almost always. I shouldn't say always, ever. Never say always. But they often grow in these big clusters and leave spore prints on the underlying fruiting bodies. This is a jack-o'-lantern mushroom here. This is the one that's famous for having bioluminescence. It'll glow in the dark. You have to have your eyes fully dilated though, so um, make sure you sit in a dark closet for quite a while um, before you can see the glowing. And then this one down here, this is Matsutake, um, highly sought after edible species. But again, you can see these all have very robust um, stature, and they're white spored and attached gills, not free and not usually not um, decurrent. Although here is decurrent um, on this jack-o'-lantern. Then colibioid are basically similar, but more sort of average shape. And so that includes some real beauties like this Lacaria amethysteo occidentalis, which means Western amethyst Lacaria. This is called the parrot mushroom down here, really beautiful. And then these are actually Gymnopus, which used to be Colibia, but basically average stature, attached gills, white spores. And then finally, marasmioid and mycinoid uh, species. So marasmioid are basically very thin, stiped, often very tiny. You can see these are growing on Douglas fir needles. And there's that back there is a tan oak leaf to give you an idea of the scale. This is growing on a Douglas fir cone. This is the genus Strobilurus. And then these two are mycenas that are growing on in the duff, bell-shaped, fragile-looking kinds of fruiting bodies. Again, white spored, attached gills. All right, let's go over to the non-gilled species. Now, some of you may think that these are gills, and they kind of do look like it in a general way. But if you look closer, you can see that they're really more like ridges than gills. So, think of your classic mushroom like a portobello or oyster mushroom or something like that. And it's got blades. Those are true gills. The cantharelloid group don't have those gills. They're called cantharelloid because the genus Cantharellus are the chanterelles. And so here is Cantharellus californicus right here, the California chanterelle. This is a in the genus Turbinellus now. It used to be Gomphus, and this is a close-up of of the the spore-producing surface underneath them. These it's hard to tell with this photograph, but the they differ a lot from chanterelles because, for one thing, they have a very deep center. So chanterelle, um, it doesn't go very deep. So it's kind of a shallow, but bowl-shaped top. Sometimes not even that. Sometimes it's convex as opposed to concave. These turbinellus literally goes down really deep, can go down several inches, almost to the very bottom of the stipe, can be hollow, essentially. These are sometimes called woolly chanterelles. They tend to be a little scaly on the inside. You can kind of see that a little bit here. Anyway, those cantharelloid. Then there's the boletes group. We're going to see a lot of boletes. So here are some kinds, several kinds here. This is the king bolete, Boletus edulis. This over here is the I don't know the common name for it, but it's um, characterized by having yellow pores, red stipe, velvety top to the cap. This one's very slimy. This one grows under pines. This is a the genus Suillus pungens. And then I've done a cross section of a bolete here. If you look on the undersides of these, you can see it looks like sponge, but what it really is the ends of tubes, and the spores are produced up inside those tubes, and they fall down out of there. A little earlier when I showed you some spore prints, you could see some of the boletes do make spore prints, but it's tough. I've never had much luck with bolete spore prints, but they mostly have an artistic value because they look good when they're on a piece of paper, and you can use some sort of a fixative and you can frame it, put it on your refrigerator. They're not that important for identification. So with gilled mushrooms, spore color is important, not so much with other categories of fungi. All right, and then there's the polypores. And the polypores are generally tough, sometimes even woody. So for example, this is a red-belted pine conch, and that's a really woody one. The over here, this is Trametes versicolor, the turkey tail. Down here, this is the gilled turkey tail or gilled polypore. So those are actually look like gills, they act like gills, but it's actually on the from the top looks a lot like a turkey tail, and they're more closely related to turkey tails than to gilled mushrooms. Uh, my friend Jessica here is holding the Dyer's polypore. So this is one of the few polypores that grows out of the ground. And it's because it's a root parasite on nearby trees. And this is a particularly big one. Um, and she's particularly small, but still kind of looks like like it's bigger than she is. Anyway, and then speaking of big, this is a artist conch. And this puppy's about that big. It's a big mushroom. Uh, fortunately, well, unfortunately, they are used by artists, and that they just use a stylus. Simply touching a artist conch on the underside of the pore surface stains it brown, and it stays that way for a long, long time. This particular piece was made for David Aurora, who will be at the Fungus Fair. He wrote Mushrooms Demystified and All That Rain Promises and More field guides. But anyway, this is his pride and joy that somebody made for him once upon a time. Uh, they're perennial, and once you take them off of there, that's it. They don't keep growing. So it's kind of sad. There's not as many as there used to be. All right, and then the gastromycetes. So so if you have a gastrointestinal issue, that's something going wrong with your stomach, right? So that's what gastro means. Gastro, in this case, means stomach, and what they're referring to are mostly puffballs. So here's my friend Alex with a puffball. This is Calvatia booniana, significantly bigger than his head. And then this is a earth ball, it's called. This is scleroderma. This is a stinkhorn. Some of you may recognize that. You can see back here some eggs. And then these are bird's nest fungi, and these little quote unquote eggs. Um, these are really tiny. These are smaller than the end of my little finger. Um, these little eggs are literally little puffballs, essentially. So they're little structures full of spores. So that's where the name gastro stomach mushrooms comes in. These are not related to each other. Um, uh, the scleroderma with the black interior might be related to that big puffball, but the other ones are not related. But they're still in this old category called gastromycetes. And then finally, other stuff. So we have a bunch of other things that we might have. So I'll probably have a miscellaneous table upon which you will be putting uh, the things that don't fit in those other categories. So this is witch's butter, the jelly fungus. Many of you recognize the coral fungi. We may actually have to have an extra table for that. There were a lot of those on the table last year. They kind of took over. This actually is not a fungus. This is a slime mold. This is called the insect egg slime mold. But we're going to put it out anyway, and we'll show it off and talk about it to the general public. There's a morel. And then related, here are a couple of species of cup fungi. So here's a large cup fungus, and then you can see a little eyelash cup back in the back there. This is called the bear's head hericium. It's related to lion's mane. Actually, that might be a lion's mane. I'm not sure. But anyway, it's in that group, the genus hericium. And then, believe it or not, this is a fruiting body. This is what we call a crust. And there's some thought that this is the original fruiting body that all other fruiting bodies evolved from just being a crust on the log with some sterile tissue on it, producing spores, um, to the wide variety of colors and shapes and sizes that we have today. And then I've got a few kind of cool things. So there I am with a really big mushroom. That was in Hawaii. They grow them big there, but not as big as this one down here. Uh, so do you see this guy down here that has a white shirt and a looks like a black thing? That's a pair of binoculars. So who do you know that might be interested in mushrooms and birds at the same time? Oh yeah, that guy. Yeah, that's me actually. Back in 2010, uh, this was put together by some uh, uh, some geek from Berkeley who knew how to use. I guess it was Photoshop. Maybe it was Adobe Illustrator or something crazy like that back then. Not sure, but he had a lot of fun with the computer uh, back then. Um, this is another big mushroom. Is a little sitting stool in a bookstore in um, San Luis Obispo. These cool things. This is let me think of where that was. I think this is in shoot. I'll think of it later where it was. But these are actually manufactured mushrooms, really lifelike, really well done. But they're made by museum specialists. And then finally, there's this thing here. Now it's foreshortened. The photograph, it's a selfie, right? And those things only get to be about that big, not as big as my head. This is the genus Citeria, which is found in Tierra del Fuego at the south end of South America. This was in the national Tierra del Fuego National Park in Argentina, and this thing is called pan de indio in Spanish, which means Indian bread. I did try it; has no flavor, but it's a pretty cool mushroom, and it's a parasite on trees, as you can see. You're not going to see any of these things on at the Fungus Fair, so don't worry about that. All right. Well, thank you all very much. So I am willing to take some questions about any aspect of the ID process or the Fungus Fair, and you can go ahead whenever you would like to unmute and ask me questions. Okay, well, if you're still thinking, let me tell you a little bit about uh, where how to get there. So we're going to be in the what's called the little gym, and like I think uh, I think you'll get something from Elizabeth, who's the volunteer coordinator, about where to go. But if you go to the high school, as if you were there last year, you the general public's going to be entering the same place, so it's off the main parking lot. But you have to go up 3 flights of stairs. They're outdoor stairs to get to the little gym. Um, or you can get dropped off. There's not very much parking here, but you can get dropped off at the little gym. There is a an alley at the first stop sign on Evergreen Way. Um, actually, you know what? Let me see if I can pull that up. I may not be able to do this, but we'll
Um,
see.
JR, can you see the map that I'm sharing, or is it
Oh,
showing for you guys?
I don't see it.
No.
Let me,
I see it, Maria.
Okay,
oh, okay.
great. So if you guys look at the map, so our venue has changed a little bit. Last year we were in the cafeteria. There was kind of across from the craft zone, but that area is under construction this year. So we're going to be in the little gym, and the easiest way to enter on Saturday is going to be through Evergreen. So if you guys can see the arrow, there's a gate right here, and then you can drive in. There's very limited parking right here, so we ask for you guys to unload in this area and then drive out and park either on the street or down at the school parking.
Great. Thank you, Maria. Harish, you have a question?
Yeah, a couple quick questions. So first question, do we have to take any particular precautions with handling mushrooms? And no, okay, great. Second question is it typically okay to, remove a stipe or something like that, or are the mushrooms in short supply and we should do non-destructive forms of
Yeah,
ID?
excellent question, Harish. So first of all, with regards to handling, if you handle the deadly one, there's really only one that's really deadly. A lot. You should wash your hands before you have a sandwich. But people actually, believe it or not, uh, taste that mushroom and spit it out. So it's really on upon ingesting that you really get that you're in danger. Um, and then with regard to that, to your second question about uh, damaging the mushrooms, if there's a lot of them, don't worry about it. Like for example, we're going to see a lot of that gymnopolis, and they're big things. They're this big, uh, a lot of the fruiting bodies, and so if you're curious about that, about what it would be like to break off a little piece of that, that's fine. I would choose ones that maybe are not that great looking to do that with, just so that we can use the real nice ones in the display. One other thing that you all are going to see, I forgot to mention, is that there, besides the table displays I was telling you about, where we use the toothpicks and the skewers to make them look like they're growing out of the tissues. Um, there's also going to be what's called the woodland display, and that's really nice. So they're going to have like a couple of trees in the middle of this gymnasium, a couple of trees that are two or three trees that are growing out, and they have it set up so it looks like a little hill, and they'll have lots of different mushrooms. So a lot of our spare mushrooms will go to them, and it's really beautiful looking. So we want to have sort of the nicest looking ones go on our display tables. The second tier or any extras that we have will go to the woodland display, and then any others you can take them home and check them out after the fair, that kind of thing, if you want as well.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for volunteering. If there's still space, so if you have friends who between now and next Saturday would like to help out and get into the fair on Sunday for free, send them my way, and we'll put them to work.